I just like to say that I like being called sister much more than professor. Now, there has been a lot of debate in the left sector of the anti-war movement as to what the orientation of that movement ought to be. And I think that there are two main issues at hand. One group of people feels that that movement, the anti-war movement, ought to be a single-issue movement, the cessation of the war in Vietnam. They don't want to relate it to any other forms or kinds of oppression taking place in this country. There is another group of people who say that we have to make those connections. We have to talk about what's happening in Vietnam as being a symptom of something that is happening all over the world, as something that is happening here in this country. If we talk about the anti-war movement as being a separate movement, what happens? What happens when the war in Vietnam ceases? What happens if Nixon suddenly says, we're going to bring all the boys home? Those people, the thousands, the millions of people involved in that movement would feel as though they had been victorious. I believe a large number of them would be able to come home and relish in their victory and say, yeah, we won, completely ignoring the fact that Huey Newton is still in jail, completely ignoring the fact that Erica Huggins and all of the other brothers and sisters in Connecticut are still in jail. This is what we are faced with if we cannot make the intricate link between what's happening on the international scene and what's happening on the domestic scene. Within the whole liberation struggle in this country, the Black liberation struggle and the Brown liberation struggle, the sentiment has always been against American imperialistic, aggressive policies, because we have been forced to see American imperialism as the enemy. And while we are feeling it here at home, it is perhaps being felt much more brutally in Vietnam. It is being felt in Latin America. It is being felt in Africa. We have to make the connections. And I think we can say that, and I'm talking from personal experience, I was in Cuba this summer, and I met with some representatives from the South Vietnamese Provisional Revolutionary Government. And they said that we revolutionaries were their most important allies. And not because we take signs and march in Washington and say, U.S., get out of Vietnam, but rather because we are actively involved in struggling to satisfy the needs of our people here. And it is in this way that we can internally destroy the monster that is oppressing people all over this country. Just one last thing. You know, Nixon made a speech on November 3rd, I think it was. And he said something that we all ought to pay attention to. We all ought to take heed of. He said, understand, the Vietnamese cannot defeat or humiliate the U.S. government. Only Americans can do that. And I feel that it is our responsibility to humiliate and to defeat the United States government and all of the fascist tactics it is using to oppress liberation fighters in this country. Thank you very much.